Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the public session of the Committee of the Whole meeting of the Halton District School Board on September 17, 2024. Please be advised that the meeting is being recorded and is being live streamed on the hdsb.ca and on the HDSB YouTube channel. In the room, we have trustees Robbie, Tanya, Carol, Kelly, Amy, Shini, and Jean. And online, we have Margot and Naveed. And we have regrets from Donna. Director Ennis, can you tell us who's in attendance for your staff?
Thank you and good evening. We have Superintendent of Business, Roxana Nagoy, here this evening.
Thank you. Tonight, Jean will be honoring the land.
We begin by acknowledging the land and our responsibility to care for and respect all that provides us with life. This land, upon which the HSDSB is situated, is on the ancestral treaty and title lands of the Anishinaabe Ojibwe Mishawangig Nation, now known as the Mississaugas of the Credit. Mishawangig territory in the past and present continues to host both Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. The HDSB is committed to continuous knowledge building with respect to actions that address and resolve the ongoing impacts of colonialism. We do this by learning and understanding the true history, treaty obligations, duties and responsibilities, and Indigenous rights while actively maintaining mutually beneficial relationships and collectively respecting and caring for the land.
Thank you very much, Jean. We'll move on to the approval of the agenda, and I would like to make the amendment to reverse the order of the action items under 4.1 to start with item 4.1.4 and end with 4.1.1 before proceeding to 4.2, and that's to accommodate our staff who are in the room tonight. Kelly, would you like to move a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
Yes, I would.
Okay, I'll put the question on the floor. Are there any objections to approving the amended agenda? Seeing none, it is approved by unanimous consent. We'll move on to declarations of possible conflict of interest. In relation to our agenda this evening, are there any declarations of possible conflict of interest? Seeing none, let's move on to agenda item 3.0, which is the consent agenda. For approval, we have the minutes of Committee of the Whole from June 12, 2024. I'll put the motion on the floor. Be it resolved that the board approve the consent agenda action item as listed on the September 17, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting agenda. Shini, would you like to move the motion to deal with the consent agenda?
Yes, please.
Okay. Does this item need to be pulled for discussion? Are there any objections to approving the consent agenda? Seeing none, consent agenda is approved by unanimous consent. All right, on to discussion items. 4.1.4, trustee honoraria policy. We'll have Roxana present to us on this update.
Thank you, and through the Vice Chair. On an annual basis, we recalculate the honoraria amount for trustees. The only factor that changes from year to year is the actual enrollment of the previous budget year, which is required to be used in the calculation. The link in your agenda, so there's two links, the current policy as it is with the current 2023 Appendix A, and then there's an updated link for Appendix A with the updated calculation that I will bring to the board on the October meeting for approval, and through that also would have the request to approve and amend, or amend, I should say, the policy to include that updated Appendix A. And I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Roxana? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much. On to 4.1.3, Board Governance Bylaw. And we'll hear from the Governance Document Review Standing Committee about any additions and revisions to this bylaw.
Thank you. The proposed revisions before you are to deal with concerns that were raised around calling special meetings, conversations that we had in the spring. There were a few concerns raised when we reviewed the policy. There was some inconsistency in the language used between the section on calling a special board meeting and the section on providing notice of meeting, which is cited by that prior section. So we've tried to clear that up as much as possible. There is a substantive change in our proposed revision, and that notice of special meetings is now being, when there is a special meeting, our statement is now, notice shall be provided as with any other meeting, unless the meeting is called for an urgent reason. And then notice may be shortened to 48 hours. So in any other circumstance where it's a special meeting that's just called for a special reason, we're still providing 120 hours notice as we would for any other board meeting, unless it is urgent. So that is the one substantive change being made here. Sorry, I missed one more. In 4.3.2, we're adding some clarity around what happens when one of the mechanisms by which a meeting can be called is if a majority of trustees request to the director that a meeting be called. There wasn't clarity around what would be on the agenda of that meeting. And so we're adding some clarity around what goes into that agenda.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we can all appreciate the clarity that you've added to this. Any questions or comments for the committee? Tanya?
Through you. So I understand this was written so that clarity could be added, but I actually got more confused. Only because I have no idea what 4.3.2 means. And I say that because the first sentence is already mentioned in the paragraph above. And then the latter half of the sentence, I don't understand it. It says, notice of the meeting may also include items that a minority of trustees indicated were caused to meet. Yeah, it's clear as mud to me. I have no idea what that means. So if clarity could be added, that would be great. Thanks.
Go ahead.
The premise of that clause is that meeting has been called by the director because a majority of trustees has written to the director saying we need a meeting. Anything that the majority of trustees have written saying we need a meeting because of this shall be on the agenda. If I'm imagining a scenario in which 3 trustees write and say we need a meeting because of this, and 4 trustees write and say we need a meeting because of this, and there is no majority of material. And so in that vein, I'm proposing that the director be allowed to pull in at their discretion, topics suggested by a minority of trustees in their request for a meeting. I am happy to accept offline wording suggestions for how to improve that before we come back to board.
Okay, next in the line is Carol.
Thank you. Similar question and confusion. And it might just be my understanding of what a special board meeting is or what it's intended to be. So my impression, and based on reading some other boards' bylaws as well, I had understood it was about the purpose of a special meeting was to deal with urgent or time-sensitive matters because we have scheduled meetings that everyone has in their calendar and can attend, hopefully. So I was envisioning or understanding that a special board meeting would be something just can't wait until the next regular board meeting. So if that understanding is incorrect, then I might be coming from the wrong place, because if that's correct, then I'm not sure why there would be other things added to the agenda. If that second sentence, if there is a trustee who would like to add something to that agenda for that day, would that not go out as well and look for a majority? Because I think what's happening with a special board meeting is we all have a calendar that's set a year in advance that has all the board meetings on it, and we schedule everything around it because we need to be at them. A special board meeting is not an ideal situation because you may have trustees who just can't come. But the urgency of the matter that needs to be dealt with supersedes the notice such that everyone can be there. You know what I mean? We're kind of balancing, trying to get the best that we can get. So, in an ideal world, we'd let it wait until the next board meeting when everyone can be present to deal with it in the normal way. But it's urgent and time sensitive. So let's have a special meeting. So then the second sentence wouldn't really make sense in that scenario. So I'm wondering if you could just comment on what the premise of a special board meeting is then.
Go ahead, Robbie.
There are two premises. One is urgent. And that's in the later part where we talk about the time frame. That's where we say, now you don't have to give 120 hours notice. Potentially, if there's an urgent thing that we need to gather for, we only need 48 hours notice. And the other is important. So if we want to call a special meeting to hear delegations on the topic of naming a school, if we want to call a special meeting for one singular purpose, that doesn't necessarily have to happen on a quick timeline. It's not necessarily urgent, but it's important. And so under that circumstance, to the urgency piece, that's not necessarily in play. What we are talking about, and where I would appreciate thoughts on how to construct this is, 4.3.1 dictates that the director shall call a meeting if a majority of trustees ask for the meeting. It does not dictate that the majority of trustees must ask for the same reason. Or that yeah. So in the event that there are requests and that they are not completely aligned in what the content of the agenda should be, there needs to be a mechanism to break the logjam. And this doesn't have to be it, but it is a mechanism that I proposed. Maybe I'm thinking too far ahead, but.
Go ahead, Carol.
Thank you. I think that helps quite a bit. I'm just a little concerned. I'm kind of coming back to bigger picture and the reason that we have public board meetings and that we make the schedule available. If we are going down, now I'm thinking about Marion Thompson-Howell here and the conversation we had around trustee comments and questions, and works great for this board because we're all awesome, but who knows what's coming, right? So I'm kind of looking at this and I'm a bit concerned that we could be getting into that situation. We have a board meeting schedule. The public knows way in advance when we will be dealing with issues that affect public schools. And I'm just concerned that we're creating a way to bring more, like ideally we shouldn't be having special board meetings, right? It should be a predictable process by which we govern. We're not operations. I mean, the director could have an emergency meeting because it's operations and it's an emergency. Very rarely would we have that situation. So I'm just concerned that we're building into our bylaw a way to start throwing items into meetings where the public doesn't expect us to be meeting. I'm trying to envision a situation in which, we've got a meeting because the majority of trustees asked for it and the directors called it because it's an urgent and time sensitive thing. Or it's something, in June, the budget needs to be passed before the end of June. It's a ministry requirement. And now we throw in, redecorating the boardroom just because we'd like to do it. the majority of trustees don't want to put it in there, but we're putting it in there just to get it done, well, it probably could wait till the next meeting when the public's really aware and able to attend. So that's kind of where I'm getting concerned, kind of looking at the bigger picture. And does that second sentence really fit the spirit of what we're trying to do in terms of governance and
Okay, did you want to
transparency?
respond, Robbie? And then we'll move on to the next question.
It's a point well taken.
Okay. Kelly, were you still online or? Nope. Okay. Margot, over to you.
Thanks, Joanna. So through you, so I have similar concerns. I just think if we are adding topics that the minority of trustees bring in, that's no longer a special board meeting. So a special board meeting is to address a specific topic. It's either the majority rules or they don't, and that's it. So I think we should be mindful that, somewhat similar to what Carol was saying, a special board meeting is to address a specific time-sensitive, urgent, whatever matter, and by adding more things into it, I think we're just muddying the waters. So that's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Margot. And Amy.
Yeah, I think I take your point well, Robbie, that we actually haven't said in 4.3.1 that it has to be for the same reason. And I think that is where the amendment should be, that we ought to be saying in there that the majority of trustees want to meet for the same purpose. And then in 4.3.2, the director always has discretion to add other items, but they ought not to be ones that are not important or urgent, depending on the reason for the meeting. Like, we shouldn't be bringing new business to light in an urgent or important meeting. There has to be a defined purpose for the meeting, and the director always has discretion to add other items, but they shouldn't be ones raised by trustees.
Does the director have that discretion? The chair certainly has that discretion.
The director does as well, and I believe it's in our bylaw. I'm just going to take a look.
Okay, we can take that conversation aside.
Okay, Kelly.
Thank you. In the time that I've been here, there have been a number of special board meetings, and they all deal with either a personnel or financial matter typically. We have been called because of strike situations, for information because we needed to authorize and give the director power to close schools. We have been called for because we had to ratify contracts. The time was very short. We have been called around some personnel matters. So usually a special board meeting is only something that cannot wait until the next board meeting, and there's an urgent reason, and it has to be significant. It can't be just because. Just because, say, a majority of us wanted to paint the boardroom, that is not a reason to call a special board meeting. You need to wait till the next board meeting. There's no urgency around that. The special board meeting has to have an urgent reason to be called.
All right, Tanya?
Yeah, thanks. So I think what we're all hearing is, I think what we need to do is set parameters as to why a special board meeting can, or how a special board meeting can be called. So, for example, it's to consider time sensitive or emergency business. So I could remember the summer of COVID. We all met in the summer because that was an emergency. So I think if we first define the parameters why a special board meeting can be called, then I think that alleviates some of the confusion. So if I could make a suggestion is perhaps having heard what we're hearing tonight, can maybe the Governance Document Review Committee take some feedback from trustees? I know I have some feedback that I didn't have time to share prior to the meeting that I'd like to share. And maybe we could do that over during a Governance Document Review Committee. So those of us who do have concerns with the language or what's outlined, we could have that discussion there.
Thank you. I certainly would be in favor of adding further clarity to this and including some parameters around what qualifies as an agenda item for special meeting, much like we do for private session, right? We have that qualification added. So we'll let the committee take that away, and any other comments or feedback that you have, please share with the committee members so they can take that under advisement as they polish up the draft. Thank you. All right, so we'll move on to item 4.1.2, which is school naming and renaming governance procedure. The old adage, experience is best teacher, truly applies here. I think we've learned a lot through our school naming and renaming process. And so we have in front of us a draft that includes a number of revisions and additions to this procedure. So let's hear from the committee and have them walk us through.
Thanks. We were here in the spring discussing this item and had a number of suggestions from trustees at that point in time. I've taken those away, have tried to split out the flow of the procedure in a manner that is clearer and distinguishes the renaming and naming processes, and have brought that back for feedback once again.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the committee on this governance procedure? Carol.
Thank you. I had a question about 7.2.1. I think that's right. I don't have it. I can't get it to open right now. But the question I had is about possibly adding some language that refers to society's current standards. So it currently reads, is the school named after a person whose actions or legacy is seen to be a significant departure from generally recognized standards of public behavior? I was wondering if we could add some language, or if there's any appetite to add language to clarify by society's current standard, just reflecting that we could have a school name that's named after a person who in their time, assuming that they have now left us, was considered someone deserving of having a school named after them, and that's why it was done. But recognizing that we're now judging that person and their legacy by current societal norms, which are constantly changing. So it also sort of leaves space for, we've named a school, today, let's say, after a person, and we understand that as time goes on, societal norms may change, and that may become considered inappropriate. So I was just wondering what your thoughts are on adding just a clarification, not changing what's there, but just a clarification of society's current standard. Thank you.
So to clarify, Carol, are you speaking to 7.2.1, seen to be a significant departure from generally recognized standards of public behavior? Okay. Margot.
Sorry, it must be legacy hand, or I must have hit it with my elbow. Sorry.
Okay, that's fine. Anybody have questions or comments or wants to respond to Carol?
I'm open to that.
Okay. All right. Anything else on this item? Tanya?
Yes. So I sent in a list of edits, but I won't go over those because I figured they could be handled offline. I do have some questions that maybe we could answer here. So in section 2.3, it talks about school names reflecting disproportionately represented groups. I know what disproportionately represented groups means. My question is, who is going to be measuring this and how? Because if we're opening up a school every year, occasional renaming here and there, where is there a chart indicating where the disproportion is happening? Who's maintaining that chart and who's responsible for maintaining it? So you don't have to answer my question here, but something to think about, because if we're making a statement about it, then there has to be a way of measuring that. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Sorry, I'm just going through my notes to figure out which ones I want to talk about here versus offline. Okay, so section 7.3. We're talking about renaming. So someone in the community says, hey, maybe you should consider renaming the Kleenex school. And it says here that within a week of the receipt, the director shall acknowledge receipt of the school name review and share a copy of the request, including the rationale, with all trustees via email, with the requester's name redacted. My question is, why are we redacting the individual's name? And I ask that because when a request is being made of the board to consider something, I think it's important to also know who the person is and know their intention behind the request. Especially if we do end up renaming a school, it comes at a grave cost. So I want to understand the logic why the name here is being redacted.
Can the committee respond to that?
I can just say that has been in there for a little while. I can't remember why it was put in there, but I believe that would be a question more for staff than for trustees.
Right, but this is our GP.
Yes,
so,
it is.
So I'm wondering, why are we asking for the name to be redacted?
I don't know. This is legacy language in here,
Okay.
and I don't know.
Could I just add something to the discussion for consideration? I think part of the rationale of why redacting the name would be of benefit is because you're really evaluating the request for its merits. So the research would be done as to whether or not that's a credible request, whether or not there's a history or valuable insights with respect to what that request is asking for. So really the evaluation would pertain to the merits of the request and not the individual. But that's up for your consideration.
So what I'm hearing is that it's really to avoid any kind of bias, and it's to measure the validity on the evaluation of the request rather than making any assumptions about the person making that request.
It could very well be for those reasons, yes.
Okay, so if I could just follow up on that. So I think if this is our GP, I think we collectively need to decide whether or not we want the name redacted or not. The other question regarding that point is, we've stipulated here that the director would notify us via email. I'm wondering, and this is a question to the other trustees, would you want to know about a request to review a school name via email, or would you want have it added to a board meeting, like a private board meeting, or a discussion of some sort? maybe we could have a discussion around that.
Okay, if we were to consider this for private agenda, would this meet the specifications for what can go on private agenda? Would it fall under property matters? No. Okay, so it would be out in public, in the public package. Okay. Which means that the request would be put out there into public before trustees had, before the director had the opportunity to assess the validity of the request, which could potentially add a lot of discord in the community unnecessarily. So do we?
Okay, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
I'm okay with that. Thank
All right.
you. Keep talking. Okay, thanks.
Okay, well, yeah, just go back on the list. All right, Kelly.
Thank you. Under section 5, the chair has been put in now to collect the ballots, read the ballots, and draw the ballots as opposed to the director. And the reason it was the director was because the chair is also a voting, has a vote on this, and to, again, eliminate any potential bias or any other thing. That is why the director was part of the process. I understand it's a trustee that we are responsible for it, but that was the reason the director was the person who drew the random ballot and the controlled the process to also protect the chair because they also have a vote.
Amy would like to respond to that.
Just a couple of points. When we vote for vice chair, it is the chair who reads the ballots aloud. So, and the chair votes in that one as well. And on the naming, the name of the trustee is also read aloud. So it doesn't matter if the chair is reading them or if the director is reading them. Everyone knows who voted what way when we're voting on the name of a school. Yeah.
It's the random draw piece that may be more of a, especially if the chair is seen as maybe liking one name over the other.
Well, okay. I think we also have to have faith in the person who is chairing. And I'm not saying this because I'm chair, but we have to presume innocence.
Well, I'm totally in agreement with that, but I'm also trying to protect that person because of, I don't want any potential backlash coming on them. Even if it happens and I would never think there would be ill intent. I'm just trying to say that I'm trying to protect whoever's in the position.
Okay, I will just respond that if it were me, I would actually hold a piece of paper up so everyone could see it, because that's the kind of transparency we should have. I wouldn't have an issue with doing that. Perhaps that could be included in the wording, but since this is a trustee piece, I think it's important for the trustees to be doing the process.
All right, Margot. Okay, I think Margot disconnected herself. Okay.
No, sorry, no, I didn't. I put my hand down rather than unmute. So, thank you, Joanna. Through you to Amy, I think. So I come back to what Marion Howell has said to us on numerous times. We are, as Carol said, a good board, but we don't know who's coming in the future. So I think that is where what Kelly is saying does hold some water because, again, I don't think you would do anything untowards, but we don't know who our future boards will be. And again, I think it's important that we protect not only the chair, but the board in terms of that piece. So again, my 2 cents.
Okay, Tanya.
For the record, I'm indifferent. You want to have the director choose the name? Go ahead. Just it's like you're putting your hand in a bag and pulling something out. So, Curtis, go for it. So, those are my 2 cents. Anyway, okay, I've got bigger issues. So 7.5. I understand why it's there, but I don't know sequentially why it's happening yet. So 7.5 reads, if the school, so this is where it's a request to rename a school has been received, it's passed prima facie, the director's considering it. Why are we notifying, if it is a school named after a person, why are we notifying the person or the family of who the school's named after if we haven't determined yet whether the school's going to be renamed or not? Why cause undue stress? If we're still trying to figure out, like, hey, you know, we named a school Doug Ford. Do we really need to call Doug Ford and say, hey, there's a school that we're thinking of renaming? Or do you want to, you know what, let's do our research first. And if the recommendation comes back to rename Doug Ford School, then we'll say, hey, Doug Ford, potentially we're going to rename the school, but it'll be up to the trustees. So I'm just thinking sequentially, it doesn't make sense where it is. Like there's validity in there, but just the timing of it is a little bit off for me.
The reason for that is because our research now specifies it shall include consultation with the school community. So we're giving the person heads up that we're about to ask the school community that is named after you, should we be renaming this school? That's why it's there in the procedure. And I would absolutely, if the director or a member of the staff want to weigh in on what makes sense here, not necessarily now, but in the next week or so, we would be happy to take staff's guidance on how these items should flow together to make sure that we're doing that appropriately.
Yeah, so I understand what you're saying. I think what happens is there are all sorts of requests that come in. There could be a request that's that, you know, we have a school called Rainbow Flag School. And no, let's not do that one. We could have a school called Oak Tree School, and it's in Burlington. And someone says, you know, you should rename the school because oak trees are in Oakville, we live in Burlington. Well, the director's going to look at it and say, no, not going to happen. Go on your merry way. So no consultation needs to happen. That's just logically doesn't make sense. Then we have a school, let's say it's called, I don't know, Oak Tree School, but it is in Oakville. And someone says, you need to rename it for whatever reason. As the director, you might be like, well, is there any worth in changing that name? Do I really need to consider this? There's two paths you can take. There's one where, I'm not sure. I need to dig into this a little deeper because at prima facie, you don't know. Then there's the route where, oh my God, it's so obvious, it does need to be changed, and we need to go and talk to certain people because we need to see if they agree. So I think depending on if it's, do I or don't I, versus, oh yes, we should really consider this, there's two paths. And I think if we take the path of, I don't know, let me do some research. Let me figure out the history, why a school was named this or that. While you're still doing your research, there's no need to contact the family of someone, right? It's still too early. I think it's when you go down the other path where, oh, is there some merit, and you start going down that path, then yes, you might want to. So I think there's a difference between the types of requests. So I think if we jump in too soon to notify people or families, I think we're going to cause undue harm and undue work for people by jumping the gun too quickly on those types of scenarios.
Thank you, Tanya. I think what I'm hearing is that perhaps there's an opportunity to define circumstances when it is necessary, and I would think that's when it's going to get out in the public, because the school community has already been notified. But when is that important? And it would be when, if it's a person, the person is a local resident and they will likely hear it. So it's to make sure that, we share the message as opposed to them hearing from somebody else. But then consideration can be given to, is this person, from outside of the region, no known family connections here, and that can then be, that information sharing can be delayed. So perhaps some criteria to consider. Does the committee have anything final say in this?
My only thought sitting here is, as I'm turning to staff for guidance, is, are we too far into the weeds? Are we into admin procedure territory in some of what we're spelling out here? And does some of this actually belong in the admin procedure? And I'd, again, be happy to work with staff on figuring out where that line should be drawn.
Go ahead.
Thank you for that. I know that this is on the agenda for the GDR committee tomorrow, and perhaps that can be part of that teasing out that can happen, if you're agreeable to that.
Thank you, Carolina. Next on the list is Jean.
Yes, thank you. Under number 7, the title of number 7 is Requests to Review a School Name. By the time we get to 7.3, we're talking about acknowledging receipt of a school name change request. And I'm wondering if because it's the change, renaming the school doesn't happen until number 8. So I think in number 7, we're really just talking about the chance to review a school name and the process involved. So I wonder if 7.3 could have a little bit of word smithing on that one, because it does, again, specifically talk about a name change request. In fact, this section is about a name review, which may lead to a name request change,
Okay. Carol.
Thank you. Just to backtrack a little bit to support Tanya's question or suggestion around redacting the name of the requester, I would be in support of looking at removing that requirement. And the logic behind it is that this is a decision. So school naming is a decision that sits with trustees, and the decision to rename a school sits with trustees. We are recipients of confidential information all the time, and part of our role is to keep information confidential, and we are constantly managing bias. So I appreciate the perspective on bias. I gave that some thought and tried to think through it a little bit. I truly believe that we're constantly managing our bias. I think it's important that the director is not put in a position, although the director is managing the logistics of this process, the responsibility lies with us. So I think it's important, if a request comes in, it is facilitated through the director's office and by the director, but it is really a request to trustees. It is not a request to the director, because the director does not hold the power to change a school name or to name a school. So I think if we think of it in that perspective of, if a member of the public would like one of our schools renamed that the trustees named, then that's really a request to us. Having the director manage that as being the contact point makes a lot of sense, and certainly the work that's done around it that we're discussing now. But I do believe that the entire request really should come to trustees. Thank you.
Thanks for that. And Tanya.
I have 2 more points I'd like to discuss. So in section 8.1, this is new language in this version. So we talk about the report will also include an estimate of the one-time costs associated with renaming this school. These costs will not include a regular periodic maintenance or purchases of the school. I think I have a really good idea as to why that line was added, but I completely and wholeheartedly disagree. And that's because I know when the cost for potentially renaming Iroquois Ridge came up, everyone freaked out at the cost of $250,000. And the explanation was, well, we're going to incur those costs anyway over the next few years, blah, blah, blah. The point is, as soon as you rename a school, those changes, let's say team uniforms were probably good for another 2-3 years. But because you renamed the school, those uniforms have to be changed now. So although we're talking about periodic maintenances and purchases, there's a lot of stuff at the school, like everything will have to be changed right then and there, because you're not going to have a school named ABC with a jersey that says XYZ team. You're not going to have a letterhead with the school ABC with the XYZ logo. You're not going to have the gym floor say XYZ anymore. So although those costs would have been incurred in years to come, they're no longer going to take years to come. That cost is an upfront cost. So I would argue with the way this is written, it's how much is it going to cost immediately, because everything will need to be changed immediately. So I would argue to remove that section. And then my last one that I'm hoping that we can talk about, or not talk about, but just as an observation is, I know currently trustees receive a report at the end of the year saying, this is how many requests we received to rename a school. But now that and that language is still in this GP, but now that we're being informed as soon as requests are being received, do we really need a year-end report? I don't know. And who's going to write that report? Is it really worth, if I'm being told once a year, hey, you've got one request to rename a school, and I'm told about it, do I really need a report in June saying we received one request? I don't know. To me, it sounds like a make work item, and I don't think we need to give anybody extra work. But I'm open to everyone's comments on that line item. That's line item 8.4. Oh, 5? No, 4.
Okay, I'll let the committee respond to the second question.
So regarding the annual report from the chair, trustees may receive a copy of every request, but the public would not be aware of every request. And the point of the report is to make the public aware of the number of requests that came in. And this was specifically added during one of the massive number of iterations we did to this. I'm going to say 3 or 4 years ago. And Kelly, you probably have the best memory of why this was added of anyone. Because between you and Andrea, I think you were on every single one of those subcommittees. If you can shed some light on specifically why that was added, that would be helpful.
Sorry, if I could interject while Kelly looks for that information. We could have been doing it in the past because we weren't being notified on an ongoing basis. So now the question is, if we're going to be notified on an ongoing basis, is there any value? And I think that report was mostly for trustees to know, oh, we've received so many requests. Because right now, we're only notified when one of our schools get a request. Like if one of Jean's schools gets a request to be renamed, I won't know about it. But in this new world we're proposing, we will all know about it. So do I need a report in June? I don't know. So, and just because we did it in the past, do we need to keep doing it?
So the thinking behind it was we did get a lot of requests or questions about school names, and trustees, there was a time when trustees never even knew that those requests came in. So so it became an improvement when trustees of the area did find it, but not all trustees knew. So we felt it was important that all trustees should know about the number of requests that come in every year in a report at the end, at a certain time of year, because even though we may not act on them, we still should be knowing that the community is reaching out to us and telling us that, and it shouldn't be just the one trustee from that area potentially, right? So, sorry,
Amy?
So it was also for the public, though, and I remember that it was for the public because we wanted them to be aware of the number of times that a specific school's name had been requested for renaming. We had one school that was getting several requests every year, and we wanted the public to be aware that that school had had requested name change 4 times that year, and none of them had proceeded, and we wanted them to know that. And so there was that public facing piece as well that the public does deserve to know. And at that time, it was just the trustee for the area, but that the public did deserve to know that there was a large number of people requesting that name change.
and also the information was shared why it wasn't considered. So it was beyond just that.
So I have no recollection of us including the reason why it wasn't renamed. So I would have to pull up old reports to verify what I'm thinking, but I have no recollection as to us including the rationale in the report for the public. But again, we did it in the past. Do we need to keep doing it? And did the public ask did the public ask for that information? So I'm just asking, is there any worth in doing that going forward?
Mm-hmm. Margot and then Jean.
Thanks, Joanna. So again, I have to, I don't know if I agree with Tanya, but I seem to recall that when a school name, there is a suggestion of a renaming and we decide not to rename it, nobody knows it. It's just squashed. So we don't even talk about it. I'm almost 100% positive that that's the case. And I could draw specific examples, but I won't right now.
Okay, thank you, Margot. Jean?
Yeah, my only comment with regards to this, Tanya, is anytime that our board it can be transparent about things of interest to the public or of the public interfacing with us, anytime we can be transparent, I think it's a good thing. I like you though, I can't even remember ever seeing a report of any of this nature coming before us. But you know, maybe there was never any request. So, but I just go on the transparency end of things.
All right, and Carol.
So always a fan of transparency. I would suggest if this stays, that it be more clear about what outlining all requests means. So if we as a board would like the public to know every school that has had a request and why it was rejected, I guess. If that's going to be in the report, okay. I can predict this might be problematic, but if this board's been doing it for years prior to my arrival, then I'm quite happy to let it continue if there's evidence, if we can pull some evidence, like those old reports would probably be helpful because there hasn't been one since I was elected to the board. It would be good to review what they look like. It sounds like they were done in the past. So yeah, I mean, if it doesn't have the name of the school and why the name and the justification for the name request and why it was rejected through the director's process, or what we've asked the director to do, then I'm not really sure there's any point. Because if you don't give all of that information, the public could read into why, and then we could end up creating more animosity and division as a result.
Sorry, if I could make a suggestion, before we start talking about something we're unsure about, maybe offline, we can pull up some old reports and at least we'll all be on the same page memory-wise. Yeah.
I do need to say, though, I am preparing a report for October's board meeting to do the annual report that is due in October, and I was not going to go into that level of detail on the report because I think there is too easy to cause more damage. So, yeah, I was going to prepare a very brief report.
Yeah, thank you for this conversation. And I do recall that protecting the privacy of some of the individuals who might have been named was paramount as well. Not drawing out and discussing anything that would have caused them harm. So I think it might have been as easy as simply did not meet the criteria for renaming, and that would have been the reason given. Okay. We are going to move on to our final procedure for review, and that's Director of Education Annual Performance Appraisal Governance Procedure. This item I know received a lot of feedback by way of, wording and phrasing suggestions, but what we want to focus on tonight is to have the committee walk us through the impetus for these substantial changes to this governance procedure and outline all the things that we need to keep in mind. So as you are reviewing it and listening to the committee, please consider more the high-level questions that you might have. This is still work in progress, and it will be coming back to us as the drafts get, more formalized and finalized through our discussions. So over to the committee.
Okay, Robbie asked me to handle this one, so I will. So basically, what Joanna said, this is very, very rough draft. It's nowhere near complete, but we wanted all trustees to be aware of the timelines that are involved regarding the regulatory timelines and how we as a board plan to be ahead of those timelines in order that we aren't doing this work in August, which would be the final deadline for submission. We want to be a little bit more efficient, a lot more effective, and not have special board meetings in the summer if we can avoid it. So this basically is the old GP with the new with the new legislation plugged in. That is all this is. This is not ready to go to board. This is not tidy and clean. This is letting everyone know just how many deadlines we have and how we are looking at meeting those deadlines. I also felt that given that the DPAC has now been formed, it would be a really good idea to have the 6 members of that committee in the know about what's expected of us as a DPAC. Like I said, this is nowhere near done. There's a lot of work that was also done by the DPAC committee that needs to be plugged into this, so a merging of the two. And so I just wanted to, it was actually bring it forward so people can see the work, the workload, and the work timelines and get their heads around it. So if we have any questions, Jean.
Thank you. And I just want to make a comment in regards to Carol and Joanna and I, who had to deal with the OREG, 8324, I think it is, and try to amalgamate it with the process that we ran through last spring. And everybody can remember last spring how compressed it was, how messy it was, and so on and so forth. I want to say this about the OREG. It is very prescriptive. It is very time-bound. It is very laden with detail. And I think this first chance to bring this procedure before us is taking a great amount of that material and inserting it and making it easy for us to follow, or easier than the OREG itself. However, that being said, it's a real lofty document to try and understand. I think Carol and Joanna would agree that there's detours and rabbit holes in the way the document's reading. It talks about, the evaluation of a director who started not at the beginning of a year, but partway through a year, and how their evaluation looks different than, and it has all these other permutations and what have you. I would say this is a great start. I'm so appreciative of Amy. I look at this and I'm thinking, our committee, Carol, Joanna, and I, we took 2 or 3 meetings to try and cobble this together, and we found ourselves just copying verbatim sections of the OREG because it's so prescriptive, and how could we word it or do anything different than what the OREG said? So I think that this is a really good start. I look forward to really I took 2 or 3 hours today to really dig into it, and I see lots of area where we can manipulate this and make it easier to follow, or maybe just even the numbering of some of it. So kudos to Amy, who must have spent like a week or more trying to put this together. It takes you a day or so just even to understand all the permutations in the OREG itself. And I know that, and maybe it's a good time to hear from Curtis, because I know P-Code had a response to the OREG, and I'm not sure if P-Code was expecting any changes to be happening to that OREG, or if everybody in P-Code is just going to ride out the OREG as it is. I think there was some recommendations or suggestions, or I wonder if you could talk to us about where P-Code stands on the OREG.
Thanks for that, Jean. I think that most, the organization and most directors have sort of settled into the OREG and the patterns. Different boards reacted differently to it. We sort of had a hybrid where we were trying to blend the old and the new, where some boards decided to just wait and start the new afresh this year. So the directors had an opportunity to just not have an evaluation last year and to start fresh. And so they didn't go through what we went through. But I think I think we have sort of settled into the regs as the government says, this is what it is, and we have to find a way to work with it. So I think we've accepted it.
Okay, thank you, Jean. I'm just going to correct something you said. The DPA committee, I believe, and I'll exclude I was on it, but I'm going to take myself out of it. You and Carol did a fantastic job. As a DPA committee, you came together and you quickly adapted the new regulation and the timelines. Compressed timelines, yes, everything was very rapid and required a lot of flexibility. It was compressed and rapid, but it was not messy, because that would suggest something very negative. I think it was very well structured, but it did require enormous amount of flexibility from the director, and we really appreciated that. In that the director had to change his timelines and produce things much sooner than was originally expected. And, like our goal was the timelines were changing and shifting, and Director Annis did a really good job in working with us on that and being able to deliver as as the timelines demanded. So kudos on that. I think that was really well executed. And now, because we already had gone through that and put that to rest, we can now start up with the new process, the new timelines. We have the committee in place, and this should go much smoother now. So fingers crossed. All right. I see a speakers list. I'll go to Carol.
Sure. Thank you. So I think the summation is we're awesome, right? That's what we've all agreed. I'm kidding. So I just pick up on something that Jean mentioned. So we did copy and paste from the reg for a good reason. So I will defend us on that. I think, Joanna, actually, you're kind of discounting your involvement. I remember distinctly there was a time where we were looking at one section of the reg and you clarified it because I was reading it incorrectly. So it was definitely a team effort. We have to realize that this GP is ours, but at its very base, it has to comply with the reg. So the best way to do that is to copy the language and then indicate for future boards who will use this that the difference between what is required and what we've added to Haltonize it. I like that word now. So there's a few comments that I have as we go through, and thank you for giving this a long period of time in this meeting because I think we need it. I'd just like to ask sort of the bigger picture questions to start with before going through it. And obviously I will take my turn as determined by the chair. But first I wanted to ask, I guess the big one and the big departure from the reg is the timeline. So the ministry is envisioning the bulk of the work in a normal year. So not a year in which we have a multi, what do they call it? The big assessment, not that year, but in a normal year, the months of July and August are the time that a lot of this work takes place. And so the decision has been made in the GP, not as a board, I don't think, but in the GP, that we are not doing that. So we are moving timelines. One example I can just give, I think it's about a month and a half shift of the time. So, we're doing by June 30th what the reg requires by August 15th. I'm always a fan of doing better. But I am concerned about the spirit of the reg and why it was determined that, and you might have an answer to this, Amy, why it was determined by the ministry that this work should happen in the summer. Some of the things that I had read or heard was, June is a very busy time for directors of education and for trustees. And so it's moving this one role, which is very, very important, or one task into the summer when the workload is lighter. The other justification I've heard, and that makes sense, is that we are asking the director to report on the previous school year. And so to do so when it has not yet finished, is that a reasonable request? So maybe if we could just start with that question about why we're departing so dramatically from the timeline.
We are being more efficient than the timeline that the province dictated because we are allowed to, for one. They don't say you cannot do this early. They're saying it must be done by. So there's nothing prohibiting us from doing so. And we have this trying to end by the end of June, which is the last day of the evaluation period. Some of the pieces of it get done in that final week. So I don't think it detracts from the work that gets done in June. There is the opportunity for June's work to be included in there. We very, very rarely still have students in school on June 30th. So I am quite comfortable with us doing this, specifically because it is very difficult to get a board of trustees to be able to attend a special board meeting in the middle of the summer. And now going forward, you have to be in person unless you fit into one of the special categories. And this is arguably one of our most important roles, is assessing the performance of the director. And if you're not able to attend, then your voice has been taken out of the equation, in effect. I think it's very important for all trustees to have their voice on the DPA. and the way of ensuring or being more close to ensuring that is by tightening the timeline such that we finish commensurate with the end of the school year. And that frees people up who have families with small children or families that go on vacations, so that they're not bogged down by concerns of not being able to be part of the DPA. This is essential work and it's important work. And so I'm at the will of the board on this, obviously, but I firmly believe that this is doable. And it can not just be doable, but it can be done well. Yeah.
Actually, that particular directive to move into the summer, I think, was one of the pieces that caused the most consternation among directors. They just didn't like it. And so I know there was a lot of rebuttal to that, but, you know, the ministry didn't change it. But most directors don't like it at all.
Okay, I'm going to go to Jean as member of the DPA, involved in the last cycle. I'm guessing you might want to respond to Carol. Go ahead.
Yeah, and Carol, you make a very good point about that. I remember being at OPSPA in the CSBA or OPSPA meetings at the beginning of July, and we were an outlier in the sense that we were pressing forward through the summer to finish everybody else had done it. My point in ringing in here was I wanted to hear from Curtis. Curtis has told us about all the other directors, but I remember having a chance to chat with Curtis when we were setting up that compressed time frame, and Curtis made it clear, I'd like to have a little bit of holiday somewhere, like, hello, like, and you know, as it's important to us that we have for his own wellness and his own family plans. And I know we talked to Carolina Khan, could we get the number of people that are required to put on a board meeting in the summer? And that was going to be problematic. And I also had heard that rallying together all of the trustees in trying to find dates for some other PD during the summer had truly become problematic. And so in the spirit of allowing everyone that ability to stand down, walk away, regroup, refresh, rejuvenate, I think that it's the way to go. However, once again, to your point, Joanna, we put extreme pressure on the director to compress, get things done, and to Carol's point, during what is known to be a very busy, for the most part, month. At the end of the month, it's busy for all of us to attend commencements and things like that. So I guess I rang in because I wanted to hear from Curtis what his viewpoints are in managing the process to a conclusion during the month of June.
No, it's I much prefer it to finish before the end of the year. I prefer it to working through the summer on it.
Okay, so we have that opinion. Let's move on to Tanya.
So the GDR committee has already received my commentary on style and grammar and all that stuff. But a few things I wanted to highlight is that I think when the GP is being rewritten, in reading it, there are some notable differences between the GP and the policy that pertains to the GP. So I would ask that when working on the GP, that the policy also get a quick peek-see to see what other words need to be changed so that the two items are in sync. So just a comment on that. The other thing that I want to talk about is if the will of the board is to do it by the end of June, my only worry is, what are the goals of the director? Does the director have goals that are dependent on June 30 results, or results that are going to be received after June 30th? Because what I don't want to happen is assessing the director and then look at a line item and say, results not available, results not available. But if I waited until the end of the school year or beginning of July, I would have those results. So I don't know what those measurements are, but I think we need to be very careful before we make a decision. Are we setting ourselves and the director up for failure? Because if we want to rush to June 30th and those results are not available. So I think we're going to have to look at that. My other concern is, if the ministry has come out with regulations, I think there's also a line item in there that asks for action to be done in July and August. Now, I'd have to refresh the timeline, but I think there's actionable items in July and August. So I think if we say, nope, we're not going to do them because we're so efficient, we got this done by June, are we then not meeting the regulations? So I don't know the answer to it because I don't have the regulations in front of me, but I think it's something that we need to look at hand in hand to make sure that we're being so efficient by copying the reg, but then, we'll just skip this section that says you need to do something in July and August, and then we don't do it. So I don't know the answer. I just wanted to bring it to the committee's attention so that that can be reviewed.
I'll certainly check that, but I believe it was by those dates, not on those dates, but I will review it.
All right, so it sounds like the committee's going to take away the feedback, verify, make sure that the policy meshes with the procedure, and check the dates. And we need to do ensure that the director's goals are not, that the evidence for achievement is not limited by the June 30th cutoff date. So that's something the committee can work to review. As for, okay, Jean, do you still have a question? Or is that from before? Probably before?
That's from before, but I wouldn't comment on what you just said.
Okay, go ahead.
There is a Pardon me, to your point, if we're creating a situation that already determines that the director won't possibly be able to, it is worthy of consideration. And maybe there's adjustments to what the director can use as evidence to speak to whether or not he achieved the goal that was different than maybe what was anticipated, given that the time frame has been compressed into June.
Okay, thank you for that. And I think our final.
Sorry, I have one last question. So because this is a GP based on a new regulation, will this policy be sent to legal for their stamp of approval to make sure we did everything properly?
Hang on, before you answer that, because I will ask you to speak to the process for, let's go to Carol as the final speaker on this.
Thank you. So are we limiting how many things we can talk about? Or when you say final speaker, can I bring up a new topic? Or it's
on
still,
this? Sure, go ahead.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So just informationally, it's item number 7 in the reg that specifies that during the months of July and August, blah, 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 the actions have to be taken by the date. So the July and August is prescribed in the reg, and the dates that are specific to happen in July and August are by. So the first thing is July 7th, it has to be done by. So I would assume it could be done by July 1st, right? By August 15th, the board has to have met and passed the motion. I guess it could happen a lot earlier. So it does seem to me that the ministry might have thought of this, but of course I won't assume, because it's all by. So, if we're efficient in the steps that are outlined in number 7 in the reg, perhaps it could be done before August 15th, understanding that there are folks who want to take holidays. In terms of it being a special meeting, my assumption would be that when we set our board meeting dates, this will become a regular board meeting date and will no longer be considered special, because we know annually we must meet. So I don't think we have to call special meetings going forward. So that's just a follow-up on that. And then my new question, I guess, is the other sort of bigger picture thing. So not just not typos and admin things, but also I'm wondering the steering committee. So in this GP is the first time I've seen a steering committee mentioned. So the regulation stipulates that every DPAC must have a minimum of 3 members and no more than 7. So again, we would want legal advice, similar to the legal advice on number 7. We would want some legal advice on that, I guess, to find out exactly how many, can the board choose? Can we as a board decide, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7? I just wondered if you can talk about the steering committee and the idea behind it. I'm not quite clear, first of all, why there's a steering committee. I understand why there's a chair, vice chair, and secretary, because it is a committee. I'm wondering, what do the remaining members do? Because throughout the GP, I won't list all the sections, there is stipulations for the steering committee to do certain things. And it's not clear when I look at what the steering, where the steering committee is not involved, what is the rest of the committee doing? And what's the idea behind that? Thank you.
So it was probably poorly named. I wrote this the same day that I wrote the striking committee report. So that's why you're seeing that in there, because it was in the striking committee report. And so that's why that's there. I recognize that it was probably not well worded. And the idea behind it was that if we have 7 people on the committee, it becomes unwieldy to find dates to meet with the director. That would be 8 people trying to meet with the director. And we have trouble enough finding dates to meet for smaller groups. So I was trying to simplify. Steering committee is probably the wrong term, though. I'm thinking what it more is that when those times are that it says that the chair and at least one other trustee will meet with the director, I was thinking it would be those 3. But maybe that's too prescriptive and it has to be up to the chair. I'm fine either way. It was just one of those thoughts that went into my head and I put it on paper. But I'm fine if the rest of the trustees are not happy with that, I'm happy to take it out. I just thought it was simplifying who went with the chair. If it's the chair and the secretary, or the chair and the vice chair and the secretary, or if it's just the chair picks someone. And that was the only thought that I had. It was just trying to simplify it. And maybe by doing so, I made it too prescriptive. Does that answer your question?
Kind of. We've read the reg 1,000 times, right? And so yes, there's places in which it is mandated that the chair meet with the director plus one other at least. So I think maybe I was viewing it as every member of the committee would have the opportunity to participate in that meeting, but at least one has to. So the chair is not going on their own. Whereas it sounds like you've come at it from the perspective of the chair has to pick a person. So rather than just picking, they'll just, always know that it's the secretary going. I think it's a different way of viewing it. I'm not really sure what the point of having a committee is if you've prescribed in the GP that it has to be this small group. understand. And I think that's why the flexibility is there, right? Because you don't want to impose on the chair. They have to bring the whole committee with them. It could be up to 6 people. That would, or it could work out perfectly, right? So you never know. But the way you're prescribing it, I think, by creating a steering committee and then saying what the steering committee is doing is you've now decided who. And what I was reading into it is, or getting from that, is that you've now got, because we have 6 this year, we could have 7 next year, you've got 3 people who really aren't doing very much. It's difficult to, it's difficult to determine from the way you've written the GP what those people are doing. So I'll just give an example. In 3.1.7, it says that the chair, secretary, and vice chair will form the DPA steering committee and will set the meeting schedule and agenda, which makes sense. However, also meet with the director to develop and finalize the performance plan. That in the reg is prescribed as the chair plus at least one other committee member. So that's a place in which it doesn't have to be the steering committee. It could be the entire committee if it works. There's also another role that should be there that's missing. So there's multiple concerns that I have with the way that it's written, mostly because it's diverting so much from the reg, and I get concerned about our compliance if we change things. I have no problem with adding more, and we've done that. That was another question that I have when it comes to the 360 process. We have added more as a board. This doesn't seem like adding more. This seems more like trying to change the directive. Thank you.
Well, as I said, I'm happy to take that out. So consider it gone.
All right, yeah. Next on the list is Tanya, and I'll just ask you to please watch your time.
So the regulation stipulates 3 to 7 members. I think sometimes in an effort to Haltonize things, we go overboard. So let's keep it simple. Over the last year, we had 3 people on the committee. It worked well. And to Carol's point about what do all these other people do, it sounds like really there's no role for them. So we're just adding more people into this scheduling dilemma. So I would recommend keep it simple. 3 people. It's outlined in the reg. You know what those 3 people need to do, and let's try to stop going above and beyond what's expected, because then we just go down rabbit holes. So those are my thoughts on the number of people on the DPA committee.
I'll get Amy to respond.
Yeah, since the reg says 3 to 7, if we limit it to 3 and a 4th person wants to be on, we're in trouble. Because the reg is clear that we can have up to 7. It doesn't say minimum 3, maximum 7. It says 3 to 7.
Right. So my caution is we don't have to stipulate this. The DPA committee must consist of. All we need to say is the DPA committee minimum 3, maximum 7. But I think those people who are on the committee need to realize what is their role. Like if I'm the 7th person on the committee, what is it that I'm doing? Because after today's discussion, I have no idea what those people are doing on the committee. So is it just, again, make work? I'm going to make work for the chair to figure out a time for these 7 people to meet, but then those extra 4 people have nothing to do. So I think if we're going to add all these extra people, the people joining the committee, they need to know what their role is going to be. And that's my concern.
If I can chime in, the old regulation, the Ontario regulations allows for anywhere between 3 and 7 trustees. And so as a result, a call went out to trustees to see who was interested. And a total of 6 responded. And so by virtue of the regulation, they're all permitted to be on the committee. In terms of workload, I certainly saw lots of opportunities for sharing the workload that we did last year. If you recall, all 11 trustees were invited to provide feedback and comments, and the onus was on the three of us, or one of us, to consolidate everything for review. And so I think that there are aspects that can be shared out where everybody can contribute, but I certainly see value in logistically being able to proceed with not the entire group to meet with the director or take any kind of action with the agreement of the rest of the committee, just to make things logistically easier, right, in terms of scheduling and meeting. It's easier to, as you say, book a meeting for 3+1 than 6+1. Okay, I see Kelly on the list.
Thank you. So my understanding of the way the reg went now is the other people in the committee are the people that would be providing other feedback based on the information that is being done through the director. Like in the past, it came back to board and anybody who wanted to could be on the committee to provide the feedback. Now it will be those people in the committee who will be doing that extra feedback piece. No?
There's no limitation on who gives feedback. There's a limitation to the number of people on the committee.
Okay.
So there's a difference. I would still go out to all 11 trustees for feedback. I think that's part of our job, and I certainly wouldn't want to see up to 4 trustees not have that right or responsibility. I don't think that's fair. But I do see where both actually where Carol, Tanya, and Joanna are coming from on that, and that is part of the extra work that needs to be done on this. This is a skeleton. What we're looking at right now is a skeleton, and if we want to pretend it's a fully formed human being, we're not going down the right road. This is a skeleton. Let's add flesh to the bone.
Can I just interject to your answer? Number 6, part 4 says that the committee chair is to request feedback from every member of the board in respect of the director's progress towards implementing the action. So in fact, there is.
Yeah. We should. Everyone should be. That's what I was. Okay, but then it comes back to committee for discussion based on. It is on. But it does come back to committee, that the committee of all DPR, as opposed to coming to the whole committee.
Okay, Robbie.
Thanks. 2 things. One to speak to the question of 3 to 7 committee members being allowed and 4 wanting to be on it. If our board has decided that within the 3 to 7 parameters, we will have 3 committee members, then we have our process for choosing 3 committee members, regardless of whether 7 people express interest. That's not a problem. That is acceptable within the reg. The question I had actually, Tanya had asked earlier, will this go out for, when complete, will this go out for compliance review to legal? And in back of my head is the one thing that I have heard different things on from different boards in the province of, are a majority of trustees allowed to be on a committee? Despite the province saying you can have up to 7, that constitutes a majority of our board. And so that's one of the things that I would love legal to weigh in on.
I can actually respond to that because in our current DPR GP, we say that all trustees are considered part of the committee. It is only the chair that is determined by striking committees. And that is the way that we have done it for many years. And we have had legal go through our bylaw and our DPA before. You can see the legal framework in there, in the language. Legal has very much not said this can't happen.
Okay, so I saw you nod, so it will go out to legal is the big thing? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, next on the list is Carol.
Thank you. Back to me. So the section I wanted to address now is 3.6, which looks at the biannual multi-source feedback. So it's entitled 360 Evaluation. My overall comment on the entire GP is I really believe strongly that we need to reflect the reg as much as we can. So anytime there's language, let's please try to use the reg language. It will, I think, reduce confusion in the future for any trustee who is reading the GP as well as the reg. I've done that on a few things myself, and it really does help if the language is consistent. So the 360 evaluation is a bit of a sort of colloquialism. I'm saying that word poorly. It's biannual multi-source feedback is what the ministry is asking us to do. So we can, put in brackets 360 if we want, because that's the term we've been using, and a lot of the consultants do use it. In that section, there's some language about the board shall engage an appropriate external resource. In the reg, it's entity is the word they use, and I think that, again, would help with consistency and understanding. One of the very important stipulations that I'm sure has affected many consultants this year and will going forward is that entity must have at least 5 years experience conducting an MSA, a multi-source assessment. So I think that should be added in there, again, reflecting the reg. And then one other thing on that section. So the way it's listed, if you go back to the GP that the DPA committee from last term wrote, so Jean and Joanna and I, it's there and it can just be copied and pasted. The people who are to be consulted is prescribed in the reg. So what we did, again, as was mentioned, Jean mentioned, we copied and pasted to make sure that we're compliant. So if you copy and paste, there's a list that must be consulted. There's also a shorter list of the folks that we consult as a board. And I fully agree with that. That's what's in there. It's the way that it's written. I think it should say, I think it should be less prescriptive. It's the way that the language is written. So I'd like the language to reflect that this list must, whereas the other list may. And I'll give you the reason for that logic.
No, I got it.
So it's a financial reason, in addition to being compliant, is that as we impose on future years, having gone through the RFP process, it's expensive. And so we are paying more to consult with more people, and we can have a vote on this, but I strongly believe more is better and it's worth the money. But a future board may not think so. So if we don't have as prescriptive to reach out to people that we don't need to on the reg, let's not beholden the board to do that. But again, I think just as I said, if we can stick to the reg as much as possible, then I think we'll be fine. And then in section 3.8, records retention, 3.8.1, I'm not sure where that came from, and I'm just wondering. I know 3.8.2 is in the reg, but 3.8.1, I'm just wondering what the source of that is.
That's from the reg.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that. That the retaining a copy for 6 years is in there? Okay, sorry, I missed that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Jean.
I just wanted to wrap up that conversation about how many people are on the committee and the reasons why. And I think, in a couple of years from now, when we hit our next election, it could be a great changeover of the room. And to have more people on the committee might suggest that there may be a few people left that have had some experience when the new board forms and might be able to bring those experiences forward and put the board in better shape. Even if some people are on the committee and are, I think of a train, like they might be passengers, like observers for now, but maybe more involved next year. And then who knows, the following year, maybe they're leading it because they're back and the others aren't.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. That's an important point, and succession planning certainly is important in this avenue. Okay, I don't see any more speakers, so I'm going to pass it on to Amy to wrap up for us what the next steps are for this procedure and what trustees can expect and timelines.
So I'm going to be taking this back to GDR, not this week, but soon. And at that point, we will be fleshing it out more. We will be merging some of the work that was done by last year's DPA co-chairs. And we will be having discussions about the issues that were discussed here tonight in order to go forward in a way that everyone is comfortable. That would be my plan. And I want this to come to board probably in December. We don't need it before then, and we want to get this right because we also have to go to legal. So it takes time.
Can I just add one thing from your chart on the back there? I was looking from your chart what needs to be done, and in the month of September, it talks about meeting with the director to establish timelines. So that is something like September's going to come and go before we know it. You see that happening before the end of September? Okay, thank you.
Sorry, if I can ask one last question. So you're saying the GDR is working on this GP, and I understand the role of GDR. But seeing as how we have a new DPA committee, would it be worthwhile for that committee, whoever the people are in that committee, to review this and to see if it makes sense, to see if they understand what's required of the committee and of themselves? So that would be my suggestion, is to have this run by the DPAC.
Absolutely. That was one of the reasons why I wanted it on this week's committee of the whole, is because now that the committee's been formed, they need to know what's in front of them. And yeah, absolutely. I look for their assistance on this. I look for all trustees' assistance on this. We want this to be a process that runs smoothly, efficiently, and effectively every year.
All right, thank you for that discussion. We'll move on to item 4.2, action report and information report templates. And just to jog our memory, as you will recall, during the course of our PD and review of our mandate and governance processes, we established that we wanted to ensure that our work and the reports that underpin our work focus on student achievement and well-being. We agreed that we were interested in more standardized formats to the reports that we ourselves generate and the reports that come to us from staff, and that these reports show a clear link to the multi-year plan and be evidence-based. And so in response to that, and next steps, Manager Khan, keeping our directions and aspirations in mind, has drafted a couple of templates, and so I will ask her to share those with us. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yes, so the report templates are in front of you. They are the product of a joint venture, I would say, between myself and the GDR committee. This is work that we started at the end of last year and through the summer. And so it's the result of various discussions in terms of being able to provide reports that are fulsome and meet the information needs of the board. So any comments that you may have are welcome, and it is the intent to start using these reports following the next, at the next board meeting.
Okay, and for your review and discussion, there are two templates. One is for the action reports and one for reports for information. Are there any questions or comments on either of the templates? Carol.
I'll be quick, which is unusual. They're amazing. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Carol. Any other questions or comments? Any observations? Is everybody happy with these templates? Great. Jean.
Thank you. Thank you. When I was reading it and going through the flow of how you read a report, I thought that the background, like I'm on the information template right now, I thought the background was like buried. It's two. It's after governance alignment and analysis. And have we in the past started with background and then or help me out with that, because I always like to think of, I go from here to there forward instead of here and then backwards and then here.
Thank you, Jean. I have that same observation and question. Over to you, Carolina.
That is a great question, and it is one that we definitely went back and forth on and we discussed. Part of the impetus for putting it at the end is to allow for the purpose of the report to be upfront and center. The purpose of this report is for this reason, and this is why. All of the background information, which usually is a couple of paragraphs, maybe a couple pages sometimes, you kind of have to read through all of that to actually understand or get to the point of what is the purpose of this report. So we wanted to bring the analysis up front and center so that it's the first thing trustees clearly understand why this is before them, and then understanding that background pieces such as metrics and timelines and how we got here is still in the report, but that's found later on. It's not the important piece of the report necessarily, or not the most important piece. It is important.
Thank you.
I think they call it in education backwards design, where you put the end first and you plan backwards through it. So it works for me. It's like an upside down thing, but it works for me.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of an adjustment, but I think it makes sense because we get to the issue quickly. Are there any parameters for the background? How much information will be in there? Typically, background is kind of high level. Is it now going to be more detailed? Anything about that?
Great question. I think it's really subject dependent, I think. The background should really be as much or as little, as much information as a reasonable person would need to understand the issue. So sometimes an issue is straightforward and you don't need pages of background. Sometimes a paragraph will suffice. But if numbers are necessary, if timelines, those sorts of things that will allow for broader understanding and contextual understanding, then that would be what would be required here. And then I will also mention, you'll see in bold under background, if this report is for action or decision following a prior presentation to the board or at the committee of the whole, that prior report date and number must be referenced in this report. So that way, if this is a report number 2 on an item, there's always that link back to provide that extra information that maybe would have been presented prior to the board.
Thank you. And I do like the idea of including reference to prior reports because we often need to know that, would like to see it, but don't know. It's too onerous for us to actually find the reports. So this will actually suit you well as well because you'll have a kind of an inventory of everything that pertains to that topic, right? Okay, Jean.
Thank you. I just wanted to say kudos to Carolina and all those people that produce these reports that have links to them so that when they mention something, I can link in instead of trying to find these documents. So thank you. I don't know how much work is involved. I don't even know how to make a link, but I appreciate using them.
Ditto. All right. Any other questions or comments? Okay, sounds like everybody's pretty pleased with these templates, and we look forward to seeing our reports in that format coming to us next month. Okay, we'll move on to item 5.0, committees, and we've got some standing committee updates coming up. First being Board Self-Assessment Committee, and I'm happy to speak to it unless, Robbie, you want to. Okay, so just to jog your memories again, where we left off at the end of last year, at the May Committee of the Whole, we approved the final board self-assessment survey tool that will be going out to trustees this fall. The intent is that every trustee completes the survey. The committee will then summarize the results and put them forward to the next committee for action. So, this past year, we looked at some of the items that we identified as being of importance or interest or critical, and we explored them further through group work at our committees of the whole. We also looked at connections to professional development committee, and that was the kind of the basis of the work that we were doing in our board development and performance. The committee did schedule a meeting for September, but I don't think it's actually necessary because really the next steps are to put this tool into a usable format and putting out to trustees. So we do know that we want to get this done earlier than later. And so I think once that tool is entered into usable format, you will receive an email with a starting timeline for the survey, right? And we will ask that everybody participates. Closing date will be announced, and then the committee will meet to look at the results. And I see agreement from my co-chair, so that is it. So stay tuned, and when you get that email notification, please complete the survey. Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? So moving on to update from the governance document review. Robbie.
I think you had them all already.
Well done. Thank you. All right. Trustees Professional Development. Carol. Oh, Tanya.
So I have a question for the GDR committee.
Yep.
So are we anticipating to have any of today's documents at the October board meeting?
I was expecting to bring the board governance bylaw in October. We will take back the feedback and make amendments. Is that still possible to come forward procedurally?
Yes, it's certainly possible, I think. Yeah.
Okay, that would be the one I would expect.
Okay, so if we have comments that we didn't share this evening, we could just send you an email with my chicken scratch. Okay, perfect, thanks.
All right. Okay to move on. So on to professional development. Carol, please.
Thank you. So just a reminder that tomorrow evening we have our Human Rights PD. It's fully virtual, so don't come here. There will be no one here, at least not that I'm aware of. Additionally, we had a survey, as you might remember, in last school year of all trustees to ask what the topics of interest were. And so the PD committee has since then been implementing PD to reflect those. So the next two that we've been looking at that we're in discussions with staff about are in the areas of Indigenous education and human rights and equity policies and practical execution in the board. So Director Ennis, Superintendent Petco, and Manager Khan are working with me currently as the chair of the committee to set some dates. So these are staff-led, and just a note of gratitude to Director Ennis and staff for facilitating this for trustees. So the precise details around how many sessions it should be, I think we'll defer to Superintendent Petco and Director Ennis. But the topics were certainly chosen by trustees. So at this point, we're just looking at dates because, as we've discussed many times, it's difficult to get things scheduled that aren't regular board meetings. So we are looking at November or early December. And right now, staff are looking at the dates that would work for staff, but also coordinate with all of the meetings that we're committed to. So board meetings and committee meetings and that kind of thing. So stay tuned. There will be a survey coming out of some possible dates, and we will start with that and then move on to the actual content of the sessions. But just to reiterate, they're always evenings on a weeknight, obviously not when we have another committee or board meeting. So I'm happy to take any feedback or questions on that at this point, but that's where we are for now. Thank you.
Any questions to the PD committee through Carol? Okay, Amy?
I just wanted to say to Carol, thank you very much for inviting me to your meeting last week. It was great to be a part of it, and I'm looking forward to what's coming down the pipe.
All right. I think we're all looking forward to tomorrow's session. So see you all there virtually. And moving on to our final item on this, and that's the Financial Advocacy Committee update from Kelly.
The committee will need to, when we left off in June, the next step was to look at informing the community about our infographic and doing some advocacy through that. So the committee will have to come together and have a meeting and decide what our next steps are.
Any questions or comments for Kelly? Jean.
I have a couple of comments. Just yesterday, I think I read in a media blast, I'm hopeful that one of you also read it. It was a percentage of the number of boards that are compliant with their budget, those that are in deficit, and something. And it was an alarming number of boards that were in deficit. Did anybody read that article? I'm not sure if I read it online or if I read it in one of the media blasts. I'm not seeing anybody having read it. It must have been an online thing. I thought it may have even come out from Ops. I checked that today and it didn't come out from them. Anyway, it kind of was clear to me that with so many boards being behind the eight ball and not being able to balance their budgets and coming up with a deficit budget, clearly that, in addition to what we're seeing, the rhetoric with the political climate that we live in and the number of times that political parties are talking about, well, education's underfunded, hospitals are underfunded, it seems that the climate is right, and certainly the role that we have in advocating for financial improvements, it seems like the right time. And in fact, it's probably no better a time now as people start getting ready for talking about these political parties and moving forward and what party's going to do more for education or more for. So I appeal to everyone to think of that in that light, that we do have this role, and it's important that we adapt ourselves or adopt that role and speak about finances or press the envelope every time we have a chance, whether we're in meetings with parents or meetings with schools or meetings with principals. Today, I pressed the point at an FOS meeting. I said that so important that the Board of Trustees found the funding and the lack of appropriate funding in education, that they made a standing committee. And so it's going to be part of what they do on a yearly basis, that we will continue to advocate. And I think any time that we can talk that line is just improving the awareness and building support for the fact that things need to change. And in fact, our board is affected. Whereas we heard last week, I think that we've crept up from either last or second last to third last. Our board is definitely affected. I remember one time somebody said to us, if we only hit the median, the middle point, it meant like hundreds of I think there was millions, but anyway, not hundreds of millions, but many millions more dollars coming into our board. And that's only if we hit the middle point, but we're so far down here, it's a long way away. But the point is, our government needs a wake-up call. We need to be advocating every time we have an opportunity. And that would be my point.
Thank you, Jean. Well said. Tanya.
Yes, so my question is, I guess, to Kelly. So you just made reference to the committee and the work they did in the fall, but then just last week, we passed a motion to have a standing advocacy funding. I can't remember what you called it, but it's a money one. Is that the same committee, or are you going to put a call out for the new committee?
That will be part of the next
striking committee?
Striking committee report, yes.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
I just wanted to echo Jean's comments, because I know we had some discussion about the value of this committee. at the last meeting, and I see tremendous value to it. And in fact, it was driven home to me immediately the following morning when I had to attend supervised assisted learning, and then later on discipline committee, how important resources are to our school board, how we will not be able to deliver the types of services or supports to our students if we do not have adequate funding. And I know, some committee work is straightforward. Some committees are pretty complex and do require some creativity. And I think this is one of those. And I think we'll have an opportunity to consider, the scope and what this committee can be looking at and how it can tackle some of the issues faced in public education currently, so that we get the resources that we need for our schools and our students. So thank you, Kelly, for championing that for the past several years. All right, if there are no other questions or comments on this topic, we'll move on to, oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that in addition to this advocacy, I think it shows that we as a Board of Trustees are very much in support of all of the voices around the tables and that we're amplifying their voices. We know that Roxana goes to the table and talks about the transportation monies and all the other committees she sits on to try and advocate. We know Curtis is at the P-code table always talking to his colleagues about what they're doing and how they're experiencing this and what their action plans are. So I think I forgot to mention that's a really key point, that we are in solidarity with the people around this room, that we see the benefit in trying to amplify the voice on this financial aspect of education.
Thank you, Jean. All right, to move along. Okay, any updates from board committees? I do know that staff are reaching out with dates for upcoming meetings for staff-led committees. So if you're a member, keep an eye out for the invitations and respond. And then, of course, we'll revisit our membership at the striking committee meeting in November. And I think that's it. So on to item 6.0, trustee questions of clarification. Are there any? Okay, Carol.
Thank you. I have two. One is clarification from our earlier conversation. Amy, thank you for sending that information through via email about the director's ability to add to the agendas. So that section, 4.5.3, that pertains to regular meetings only, correct? So that doesn't apply to the conversation we had about special meetings?
I'd have to check the regulation because I do believe it's in the reg.
Okay, but our bylaw says just regular meetings. Okay, great, thank you. That was just a clarification of that. And then a question that I had, and it's sort of all of us to put it out there. I know that the governance bylaw was updated in early June and we're working on it again, but it kind of seems like when we need to do it, we do it. I wanted to ask if there's any interest in looking at adding some clarifying language to the role of the chair, which is section 3.3.1, as well as we do have appendix, I guess it is, right, that has more detail of the role of the chair and the vice chair. Just in terms of clarity around speaking on behalf of the board and notification process for letting the board know if the chair will be speaking on behalf of the board on anything that is not pre-approved policy, MYP statement, or anything generic, like welcome back to school kind of thing. I was looking at the Ontario Education Services Corporation module, the training modules that we have for trustees, and there's some possibly helpful language in there to guide us. So if there's any interest in looking at that, I was just wondering what the process would be. I'm guessing GDR or, okay. So if there's any thoughts on that. I've only been on the board for a couple of years, so I'm just kind of going based on experience that it's fairly rare until last school year for there to be any public communication that trustees were not, I would say, fully aware of in terms of it just being about MYP or policy, or as I said, something generic. So just wondering if some clarifying language might be helpful in our bylaw. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions of clarification? Tanya?
Yeah, so when Carol spoke about the role of the chair, it made me think something you said earlier, Amy, that in October you have an item on your to-do list that you have to bring your report to board. So my question is, I think last year there was a policy GP, can't remember which one, that outlined the role of the chair, outlined the role of the vice chair. In that outline, is there a timeline of to-dos, which would include your to-do item for October? And I ask because if anyone is interested in becoming the chair, how would they know they have this report due in October without having to read all of our policies and the entire governance bylaw? So if there's no timeline, I would suggest maybe creating one in your current role. You know, these are the reports I have to write and these are the months that are due, so that any incoming chair or vice chair would know, you have a due date, you have an item that's due.
Certainly worth considering is the terms of reference, though, which is not as granular as individual reports. So it's not the role of the chair, it is just a terms of reference. Not nearly as granular as what you're looking at, but I could definitely put together a spreadsheet with all of the various things. Absolutely.
Okay, Kelly.
Following along to that, one of the things when I was chair I used to do is at the end of each term I used to go through and summarize what we'd accomplished as a board for the year. So looking back at our past motions and saying this is what we had passed and this is what we had done. And we haven't done it in quite a while, but it might be worth doing.
Okay, those are great suggestions. Anything else come to mind? No? Okay, moving on to item 7.0, trustee news. New item on the agenda. Jean.
Yeah, I've got some trustee news coming from Margot and myself regarding the Inspire Awards. And we've met recently with Hawa in the director's office, and we've been able to sort of review past our spring. Our spring was very chaotic. It was a lot of moving pieces, and Hawa being relatively new and so on and so forth. So I'm very confident we're going to have smooth sailing going forward. That being said, we did create a calendar for ourselves, and we are already a couple days behind. So if you should see a need for evaluation of Inspire Award recipients coming out with a very short time frame, please help. I think the beginning of the school year made us get a little bit behind. But I am very confident, along with Margot, we've changed a few things, even on the website, and even the actual certificate itself needed revising. We've changed a few things with regards to that, and I think it's all greatly improved. My second little news item is I've heard that some of you tomorrow or this week coming up are having the opportunity to make presentations at your respective FOS meetings. I had the chance to represent my other two colleagues, Naveed and Donna, this morning at the Milton Halton Hills FOS meeting. Curtis was there, packed house, very packed hot house, because apparently this school, EC Drury, hasn't had air conditioning since sometime in July, so very, very warm room. But I included, and I ask all of you to include this in your reports
to your FOS meetings, that the HLF, and you may have read it recently, that they had put out that they have this massive fundraising going on for the September, hoping to support 300 students. To date, they've supported 150, but the funds are running out, and they're appealing for additional funds going forward to get another 150 students supported. And this is with their back to school supplies and clothing and other hygienic needs. So if you have the chance to do a little pump up for the HLF and get the word out there to all of our schools that we really need their support of the HLF, that would be wonderful. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jean. Any other trustee news? Okay, not. The agenda has now been exhausted. It's 8:11, and I call